The earliest pharaoh Numa, who had once fused Egypt, did a good job, only to have his job fractured. In the first intermediate period, the Egyptians scattered and different kingdoms started to arise. Egypt was still seen as a whole, but different factions were held by different people. These nomes would be held by several people and be reunified by this man on the screen, Mentuhotep the second. But what kind of person would let slip of such a great opportunity? What type of person made Egypt slip so far that it fractured this badly and had to be united by this man? Not only did that pharaoh slip up, but it is thought that Mentuhotep is actually a Nubian. He was not the only Nubian who held a giant part of Egypt, as Mentuhotep is written in some of his steles that he defeated some Nubians in Upper Egypt and he took over their kingdoms, reuniting Egypt. Something's a little different as well about Mentuhotep. As you can see here, he is only wearing the red crown. This supposed Nubian would in the future wear a white crown, showing that he had taken victories over all the parts of Egypt, unifying them and becoming the restorer of Egypt. As the restorer of Egypt, he should probably be a little more well known than he already is. If you think about it, he did what Narmer did, but at a later period, when technologies had developed, when fracturing had been known to the people, and when other people knew that the target was to reunify Egypt. But again, who is the king that under his rule all of this would fall prior to Mentuhotep taking over? Pepi is the last unified pharaoh before the first intermediate period, which is the period when the Egyptians became fractured. The reason for this, for me, is not as clear, but it's pretty obvious that after he was in charge, things go into dismay, and even King's List don't know or don't agree who would be the next pharaoh after him because of this deep separation. Now, if you remember, this is the same pharaoh who sent one of his visors deep into the Nubian regions and even lower than the Nubian regions to go find a pygmy. And then he brought the pygmy back, and basically, that's him. Now, given how strange he is as a person and how he would call people from different regions for small ceremonies, it's quite clear that he maybe wasn't as sound as people portray him, or maybe he was as people portray him, because a lot of people portray him as slightly off, and then they say things like, "Did you know?" That's why I notice a lot of the "Did you know" videos. Did you know that pharaohs, when this guy is an exception, because he was kind of a out of it ruler. Now, I'm not saying he was crazy, but he was crazy enough to lose Egypt. But after that, it seems like the ancient Egyptians came back to their senses. But this time, it seems like they had a much more stronger Nubian influence than they did before. For example, these are some of the people who are most important under the ancient Egyptians. This is Mati, the gatekeeper. It seems to me that he is a Nubian. And not only that, he is seen or he is written as a very, very important person to Mentuhotep II. Though Mentuhotep II dealt with the Nubians, he actually dealt with them at a later date, seeing them as Egyptian enough to wait until they consolidated their own power before he took them over. The the enemy that he really wanted to get rid of first were people pouring in from Asia, and he captured these places and pushed them back. Now remember, this is 4,000 years ago, 2000 BC. But Nubia was not standing still, and Nubia was not united either. Nubia had a problem. Now we have to keep some things in mind. The word Kush is actually, at least it seems, that it's older than the word Nubia. And so Kush had this stele. This is the stele of Gemi. The stele of Gemi is of a Nubian king who brags about how he captured, and this is what they say in the translation, enslaved some of the Upper Nubians, meaning that he took over Nubia and captured it during the intermediate period, meaning this is before Mentuhotep became in charge. And so it kind of made it easier for Mentuhotep when you have to get rid of only one power instead of getting it through these other fractioned places. These Nubians clearly, as you can see here, were literate in ancient Egyptian. If you actually check, there are some things there that give it away that is Nubian, but this Nubian man was well in charge. Interestingly, you can find a bunch of kings from this intermediate period because, of course, they were severed. There were many different kings all over the place, and it's unknown exactly who would be considered the most legitimate one at the time, who came from the descendants or the real line of the ancient Egyptians. Because, of course, there's a difference between taking over Egypt and then being born of royal blood. We can say also that this first intermediate period did sort of play a role in making sure that the long line of unbroken blood was broken. And so we do not expect the kings of this period to be genetically related family wise to the people before that. This, of course, continues, and we see it happening in the time of Ramses II, and we see it happening after that with so many other people. Like, that's why Tutankhamun and Ramses do not have the same family members, but seem to come from two completely different family structures. We need to explore this word Kush because, of course, it is the true word for the ancient Nubians. Now, Nubia has taken over as a word, but it was not as old and was not as common as the word Kush. The word Kush, of course, means something completely different to Nubia because, of course, Nubia denotes it as a land of gold. The word Kush, referring more specifically to the region, is adopted and is seen used way later, even after the Nubian word had been picked up. I, Hatre, son of Krampe, Per Kush, the word Per means the, and then Kush means Kush. So Per Kush, and David write to Presbyterus, son of Paula, that I acknowledge that I owe you cataract gold which I received from you for my need. These now in the ill of God, I am ready to give back to you in poem, without any disputing words. I created this ostracan on 20 of dot 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 Thoth in the year dot dot dot. This ostracan was found in Elephantine, and it is representing the Nubian who owes money to an Egyptian, and he pays the money back, or at least he is promising that he is ready to pay the money without any trouble. This person, of course, is referring to someone else, talking to two different people in this story. But let's examine the importance of how we know that it's a later. First of all, he talks of one God rather than many, meaning that he is a Jew or a Christian. one of the two. And then, secondly, he talks of a man named David. David, of course, being a Jewish name or a Hebrew name. Given how easy it is to say the word Cush, it's almost a tragedy that the word, which is probably easy to remember and also easy to write in both English and in ancient Egyptian, that it's being replaced by the word nubia simply because the Greeks took favor to the word. I think we should bring Kush back, and I think we should bring it back stronger than it's ever been. I'll try my best, obviously, to refer to it. Almost annoyingly, the images that majority dominate the Nubian portrayal are these with these cheetah prints on them. The one thing about it that is annoying is that it does not fully capture the people of Kush, because the people of Kush had several different types of clothing, and one of them, of course, as we read in the other inscriptions long time ago, cotton and linen and all of those were made, and even their seeds are early found in the Kush areas before they are found in Egypt. And so this portrayal, though again is seen later, but it's mainly to do with various tribes that are, get dominated again. All of Kush is not the same, even though the word Kush more refers to a consolidation of power, but all of Kush is not the same. And one of the best images we see of this is of a Kushite woman in the time of Mentuhotep being portrayed with proper Kushite clothing, which turns to Africa. There's this weird thing where people say at the bottom of Kush, there is this huge turn to Africa, where you see that even though Egypt was on the slope or it was on the side of Asia, Kush was so deep in Africa that its other trends are obvious in Kush. This girl from the time of Mentuhotep the second, which I'll mention something else about Mentuhotep because we're talking about the push deep down, comes from a Nubian woman, and this item was captured by one of the Egyptians and sent back to Egypt. As you can see, it portrays these zigzag patterns, which again point directly to Africa. Not only do they point to that direction, but it seems like the Kushites had direct communication with other Africans. As we will see, the people of Punt are communicated with a long time ago in Egypt. But it seems like the people of Punt had direct communication with the people of Kush, or the lowest people of Kush, meaning the people geographically who would be closer to them. So we're talking maybe all the way down to the Meroitic regions. Those people had direct communication with the people of Kush. And in Kush, we hear years later, years after Mentuhotep, that there is great standings there. Now, Mentuhotep, like I said, was not an idiot. He was happy about his victory and he had conquered, but he did send expeditions far into Punt. And in fact, some of the earliest ideas of what Punt is comes from some early reliefs of Mentuhotep, where they portray it as some land where it's prosperous. And of course, we find so many other people. Like there is a pharaoh who came back with a Negro, not a Negro pygmy as the other one, but he came back with a Negro slave from the land of Punt. Now let's think about what that means for a second. So the land of Punt is obviously in Somalia or somewhere in Ethiopia, but let's say Somalia because of the ocean element that is thrown there. Somalia, but there's two other places which some have thrown out there. One of them being Yemen, and the other one being Oman. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because it specifically says that they came back with a Negro, meaning they used the word Kush, but in this sense, they use the word Kush to denote that he's a Negro. So this person was not of Kush, but he was like the people of Kush. So if this place is in Oman or if it's in Yemen, that would mean that would be one of the earliest evidences of a Negro in Asia, given that it's, well, the time that I'm talking about is about 1500 BC. So that would be then. But given I don't think it's in Yemen or in Oman, I will say that I don't completely cut off Asia from Africa. So Yemen to me could be a easy place not to be Punt, but to be connected to a kingdom in Punt. So let's say Somalia, to some degree, had some deep influence, even in 1500 BC, with the people in Yemen at that time. But that's a story for another day. Let's focus first on Nubia again. If we try our best, of course, to move and understand timelines, let's go back to the Pangrave artifacts. So the Pangrave artifacts are about 1850 BC, going on for another few hundred years. Now, what's important here is that Mentuhotep's reign predates this. I'll say that again. Mentuhotep's reign predates this. This, the Pangraves and all of that, being found in Egypt proper and not just in the Nubian areas or the Kushite areas, might be of that early scramble that happened during the time of Amenhotep III. This is hundreds of years later. We do see some reason to believe that some Nubians are in the Libyan areas. And let's read this so that we can get a clue about what I'm talking about. Utterance of Amun, king of gods, my son, of my body, my beloved Nibmare, my living image, whom my limbs created, whom Mut, mistress of Ishiru in Thebes, bore to me, mistress of the 9 bows, who brought thee up as sole lord of the people. My heart greatly rejoices when I see thy beauty. I work a wonder for thy majesty, and thou renewest youth according as I have set thee as the son of the 2 lands. When I turn my face to the south, so this is facing Cush, I work a wonder for thee. I cause the chiefs of Cush, the wretched, to turn to thee, bearing all the tributes upon their backs. Don't need to explain that. Very simple. He's talking about if I look to the south, what I see is Cushites, meaning everybody to the south is Cushites. Every single group that is there is Cushite. Even the word Punt I have seen being used interchangeably with the word Cush, but will return. When I turn my face to the north, I work a wonder for thee. I cause the countries of the ends of Asia to come to thee, bearing all the tributes upon their backs. Again, we're talking about Asia and how he looks towards Asia and they bring the gifts from that side and blah, blah, blah. They present themselves to thee with their children in order that thou mayest give to them the breath of life. Now, keep in mind, Asia here only represents the northern parts of Asia. So it's not representing Saudi Arabia or Yemen or Oman or any of those regions. But this is the interesting part.
When I turn my face to the west, Libya, I work a wonder for thee. I cause thee to seize the Tehenu, so that there is no remnant of them. meaning that these people have pretty much fled, and it doesn't matter because these fleeing people probably fled because they were nomadic, and so it doesn't matter if the people come and attack that specific region. The Nubians are stuck in Nubia, or the Kushites are stuck in Kush, so they face Egypt and they have to um, give offerings in order to keep life. The people of Asia, when conquered, they have to bring offerings to give life because they're not just going to run away from their homelands. But the people of Tehenu, they flee. But here's the interesting part: they are building in this fortress in the name of my majesty, surrounded with a great wall reaching to the heaven, settled with the children of the chiefs of the Nubian troglodytes or the Kushites. The Nubian troglodytes is how they translate it, but it's the Kushites located in Libya. Remember, Nubian troglodytes, the reason why they give that is because, well, there's a reference to Kushites in this area, so they call them Nubian troglodytes because that's the group. Troglodytes is the group of Ethiopians that have been located by the Greeks later. So in that area of Libya, the children of the Nubian troglodytes or the Kush located in Libya are the ones who are building this wall. And then you see this one. This one has to do with the area known as Saudi Arabia, maybe even Yemen, and maybe Oman. So notice how it's separated in this part, Asia and the Orient, which they did that on purpose, but you will see what I mean. When I turn my face to the Orient, I work a wonder for thee. I cause to come to thee the countries of Punt. Now I want you to think about what is just said. So the word that is used here in the Orient is the word east. So in the west, the Tehenu, right? And they're in the west, the Tehenu, who are the Libyans, and what you have there are Nubians or Kushite chiefs building the walls there. In other words, the people living there in Libya who are forced or have to build a wall there, a fortress for the king, are the sons or the children of the Nubians or the Kushites. To the east, which starting with Punt, when I turn my face to the Orient, when I turn my face to the east, not counting Asia, you already talked about Asia. Asia is to the north. When I turn my face to the Orient, I work a wonder for thee. I cause to come to thee the countries of Punt. So obviously, let's look at a map so we can tell here. So considering these words while looking at this map, okay, to the west we see Libya, and in Libya they say that Kushite, the Kushite chiefs set up a wall there made by the king. And then it says to the north, which of course, when we go north, we're talking about Israel, Syria, Iraq, those places. He says these people, they've been conquered, and they, in order to remain alive, they bring offerings to Egypt. Then he says to the south, the Cushites are in control there, and they bring him offerings and they descend south, right? But then he says to the east, which these guys convert that word to the Orient, which of course is Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and look down there, Somalia, right at the bottom of the screen, Somalia. There is an obvious reason why Somalia is included, perhaps even Ethiopia is included in the east rather than the south, even though I've seen the word Punt being used interchangeably with the word Kush, which I'll talk about in another episode. we can see here that this is why they say this. And he says, when I turn my face to the Orient or to the East, I work a wonder for thee. I cause to come to thee, I cause to come to Egypt, the countries of Punt. So think about it. When looking to the East, not only is he capable of of going far, which is given here, I work a wonder of thee, I cause to come to thee the countries of Punt. So deep down here in Somalia, he causes them to, I guess, give offerings or even sail to Egypt, the people of Punt. Now, again, we're going to talk about Punt in another video. Hopefully, I can get it to be an hour because we need more information in one video instead of me breaking it apart into 10 videos. But let's consider again what I said. Let's say Punt is in Yemen. Remember that there is documents by other pharaohs documenting that they fetched Cushite men, which is translated as Negroes, Cushite men from the kingdom of Punt. Meaning, if it's in Yemen, then it doesn't matter, but we're talking about Yemen with black people. Again, that would completely change the history of Yemen given how long time ago some of these documents are.
So let's go back when we talk about the Nubians. Let's go back, or the Kushites. Let's go back before Mentuhotep, right? This is the last thing we're going to look at. So these vessels, though representing after Mentuhotep, they were built, these, not these ones specifically, but this type was built prior to Mentuhotep. And Pepi the second here, who was that king who broke everything apart, and some Nubians got standing in parts of Egypt. This person here was preceded by an important king, Pepi the First. And during Pepi the First's reign, what do we see? Well, we see reference to the Medjay. Reference to the Medjay from Pepi the First is in an autobiography, and we will see it writing down several types of Nubians being mentioned prior to Mentuhotep. Now remember, at this period, the Egyptians were in charge of the entire region. They were in charge of most of the Nubians and were solidified as one kingdom until obviously Pepi II broke it apart. So, as we read in the autobiography of Weni, it says, His Majesty sent me to excavate 5 canals in Upper Egypt, and to build 3 Weshet boats, and 4 boats of acacia wood of Wawat, Wawat being the name of the people, that's one type of Nubian. Then the foreign chiefs of Irjet, Wawat, Yam, and Meja. So these are Nubian tribes that have been listed. Drew the timber for me. I did it all in 1 year. Floated them. Okay, let's pause for a second because this is an important part as well when it comes to the building of pyramids. And a lot of people, they say, oh, where's the evidence of the ancient Egyptians saying they built the pyramids? Remember, this is the 6th dynasty, meaning this is early. Now, keep in mind. So, and remember, people always say that ancient Egyptians got wood from Asia. This is evidence that they also got it from Nubia. Okay, so let's read again. His Majesty sent me to excavate 5 canals in Upper Egypt and to build 3 boats and 4 boats of acacia wood of Wawat. Then the foreign chiefs of Irjet, Wawat, Yam, and Meja drew the timber for them. I did it all in 1 year. Floated. They were loaded with very large granite blocks for the pyramid. Mernere appears in splendor. Indeed, I made a saving for the palace with all these five canals. I don't even know. This should be a video on its own, but I'll talk about it another day. But let's, again, I want to read it, but this time I want to break it down. His Majesty sent me to excavate five canals in Upper Egypt and to build 3 boats and 4 boats of acacia wood of Wawat. Then the foreign chiefs of Egypt, Wawat, Yam, and Meja, which it is important to break that down, that he considers these people, even though they're in Upper Egypt, he considers them foreign, the foreign chiefs, drew the timber for them. I did it all in 1 year. That's the important part. That everything that he's about to describe is work he did it in 1 year, which is a pretty long time if you think about it. But it's still done in a single year, meaning it didn't take him 500 years, as some people claim. Floated, they were loaded with very large granite blocks for the pyramid. So, in other words, the way that the wood was transported was probably through water, Nile. Merenre appears in splendor. Indeed, I am saving for the palace with all these five canals. So this is one of the earliest mentions of Nubians working hand in hand with ancient Egyptians. And not only are they working hand in hand, they're working hand in hand to complete an Egyptian task. And we see granite blocks, we see wood, we see all of these things coming into play. But also, we see the word foreign being used there to separate that these people are not necessarily Egyptian in the same way that the Egyptians see themselves. And again, the word chiefs is probably an important word. Chiefs, king, whatever. But we see that the chiefs, meaning they are in power. Even when he took over the side of the other side where he took over the west and the Nubian troglodytes were in charge. Notice that he said chiefs. They were still in charge of themselves, so they created a province of their own. This is the important part. The Nubians are not apart from the ancient Egyptians, not in a real way. And we can see here that not only are they not apart, but they are a mainstay in those regions. We find buildings and writings that go back thousands of years, but of course, we find Nubians located very close to Egypt who have no writing, who just accept the ancient way of living, bringing up another point that I've said before in Africa, where in Africa there used to be no force for you to live in civilization. You could live right next to and be tribal and be hunter gatherers and be nomadic and be anything like that. If you look at kingdoms all over Africa, when they get power, when they surround these areas, they let people live the way they want to live. It's not converting them into civilized men. And in this case, the ancient Egyptians, they do that, but they also have this problem where in times of war, they will refer to them as wretched because of the probable lack of, what's the word I'm looking for? Lack of civilization in some areas. And so they'll refer to them as wretched. But again, this is just guessing because we don't know why they actually refer to the people as wretched. At least we don't understand fully. So, in conclusion, though Mentuhotep resembles a very early encounter with Nubians, he doesn't represent the earliest, he doesn't represent the most expansive, and he doesn't represent the best illustration of these people, as just after his death, we see new types of Nubians or Kushites forming right under the Egyptians in a tribal way, just like the Pangrave people. But he does represent a unification. He represents the start of something new in Egypt that would then take off until the second intermediate period. If this is true, and this Nubian and his dynasty are really part of that, then one thing we should separate is this idea that Nubian means the black areas and the other one means the next to black or anything like that. What we should join together is that the Kushite regions is more about place. Just like how you notice how in that story, that tale, he says, when I look to the north, I see Asians. When I look to the east, I see these people. When I look to the south, I see these people. When I look this way, I see these people. It's not about race as much as it is about direction, which will bring me to that thing about an Abu man living in the south in that tale of Senahi, which is why I don't understand why they throw race in there. You'll almost notice that they never say the word race, except when using the word chem. In some cases, they use the word chem to describe some people as dark skinned.